Hi, everyone. Welcome back to What They Don't Say. I'm Shannon, and in this episode, Lauren and I sit down with Cindie Henrie. Cindie is a licensed marriage and family therapist, a trauma expert, and somebody who has worked with both survivors and perpetrators of sexual violence. She has spent years working with kids who have been trafficked, homeless and high-risk youth in Hollywood, queer youth in the foster system, and yes, like I said before, even sex offenders. Today's conversation is really coming from the lens of somebody who has seen all of these issues from each side of the equation, and she's here to share with all of you the insights that she's learned over the years. Without further ado, let's get into our conversation with Cindie Henrie.
We're so excited to have you on here. You are our first trauma therapist we're having on the podcast.
Oh wow,
So
you guys, I was so excited to do this. I'm really excited to be here.
I think it
Okay.
would be really beneficial for our audience members to get an idea of like your background and what you do and kind of why you're here today.
My name is Cindy and I am a trauma expert, like you said. And I actually started working with homeless and high-risk youth in LA. In Hollywood. A lot of kids will come, to Hollywood and then they get picked up by pimps and there's all kinds of, stuff that goes on the dark side, on the underside of Hollywood, which is not good, right? And so I was working a lot with those youth. And then I went to an agency called the Gay and Lesbian Adolescent Social Services. I am a self-identified lesbian. And so, I wanted to kind of work with youth who were queer and were having trouble with, it's like we're in the foster care system or probation, stuff like that. And so, of course, they were all removed for child abuse. So my whole career has been focused around trauma in general. When I finally started my private practice in 2005, I focused it on women's issues, queer issues, trans issues, and, trauma. And so the key has been trauma. One of the things that I also was encountering, especially coming from the Hollywood area with the music industry and with the Hollywood scenes, was a lot of trafficking, not just pimping, but also human trafficking and these weird occult stuff. So then I started working with DID, which is a dissociative identity disorder, which used to be a multiple personality disorder. So I kind of have seen a lot within that. And also at Glass, I treated sex offenders, which has been amazing to kind of work with the two because I have this understanding of sex offender mentality and how that affects victims. And then the way that victims internalize the experience of the abuse or the experience of an assault because of what their perpetrator is projecting onto them, which I think is a key element that a lot of people don't recognize. And also when children act out on other children, if they're being abused, that's often transmitted to the new victim,
Right.
even though technically they're not considered victims, but the experience can be so.
Oh, yeah.
So that's my background in a nutshell.
Cindy's literally done everything. Like we were talking before this about how we give you an introduction and we're going through the list. Like, okay, she's worked with dissociative disorders, sexual trauma, grooming, trafficking, LGBTQIA plus issues, literally everything. And so thank you for giving that introduction because I think that you did it so much better than we could have.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, it was my lived experience, so there's that.
Yeah.
I kind of would really love to get into the perpetrator side of things. I can't speak for everybody who's a victim of sexual violence, but for myself, one of the biggest things after it happened was why the fuck could somebody do this to another person? Like, I could not understand it, comprehend it, and it was this big question of why? So in your
Yeah.
experience working with male and female perpetrators, what have you seen about sort of the reason why perpetrators commit sexual violence?
So perpetrators are also victims. They're going to be typically they're victims of sexual violence and repeated like early childhood sexual abuse. They may have had a perpetrator that taught them to perpetrate, but even if that didn't happen, a lot of times it comes from instead of wanting, it's like you either identify as a victim survivor or you identify as another perpetrator, right? So you kind of go one way or the other after an assault. And when you're identifying more with the perpetrator side, you take on the rationalizations of a perpetrator. For example, let's say that somebody tricks somebody, or they say like, "Hey, let's play a game. We're going to play this game, and I'm befriending you and making things, really great. And like, look how special you are." And then
Right.
they're like, "Hey, do you want to try this thing?" Or like, "I'm giving you alcohol, or we're watching porn together. Well, do you want to try it and see what it feels like?" Right now, you've created, like, in that scenario, that perpetrator is reenacting what's been done to them typically. And then they're creating that same inner conflict with their survivor, right? Same thing with like an anger rapist or there's like sadistic and anger rapists, right? And they're reenacting as well. And it's kind of dependent. So it's like if I'm threatening you and like overpowering you, it's because I feel disempowered. And in order to feel powerful, I need to disempower or manipulate. A lot of times, like with child abusers, with like sexual child abuse. I'm like,
Right.
what's the word? Yay, menopause. So a lot of times people are confused. It's like, well, aren't they they're wanting to get off on this situation, but it really isn't about the sexual piece of it for them. It genuinely is about the power dynamic. And it's about, I'm able to manipulate you to get you to do something that doesn't feel right or is against your value system, your morals, your judgment, your age, your development. I'm able to control you and manipulate you in these ways. And that's really the heart of it, but it takes a sexual theme.
Do you think that I could be so off base here, but
There's
I
going to be a lot of questions around this, and I think that's super important because this is an element that, exactly like you said, this isn't something that is really talked about in literature. So when you read about it or learn it, you're not necessarily getting the experience, you're not understanding that projection of your perpetrator, which could be really helpful in your own healing
yeah
because you can take it off of you.
yeah
It's like, oh, this didn't belong to me. This wasn't mine. This was theirs.
mm-hmm.
This is what I internalized that they injected into me,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah,
This exchange, yeah. And so that's really important.
it
I think
is.
that's a
Yeah,
really key element.
me and Shannon were talking with someone the other day about the whys
Mhm.
surrounding all these topics and how like
Yeah.
we just want to know why. Like, why did this thing
Yeah.
happen? Why did it happen this way? Why do I feel this way? Why do we have certain things that happen in our brain? Why are our decision
Mhm.
making functions all fucked up after we've been traumatized? All of those questions. And I think that if you like take that step back and look at kind of the perpetrator side of things and understand kind of why they did what they did, not that it excuses anything, I think it can have a power in healing. And feel like I speak for a lot of survivors when I say this. Like, after you have been assaulted, you want to find this way to like take your power back
Right.
and like reclaim your body and your sense of confidence and your sense of self. And so I think it's kind of
Or you
important.
reject it.
Oh,
Or
yeah.
you reject it. It may not be that you're wanting to reclaim it. It's actually like, I want to distance from it as much as humanly possible.
Yeah. Which then I also think could be why like a lot of survivors then are like hypersexual and stuff like that after they've
Mhm.
been assaulted. I don't know if that's accurate or
Yeah,
not, but
yeah, you're right. No, no, no. There's kind of phases,
yeah.
and one of them can be a hypersexual phase, and then it later becomes like asexual during that hyper reenactment phase. That's a little bit more of the active PTSD.
Hmm.
And there's an active PTSD of just reenact, or like kind of act out. Like sex no longer feels like this thing that is more intimate and connected. So I may as well just dot, dot, dot,
Give it,
Right.
yeah,
right?
to whoever.
Or I'm reenacting something and I'm re-victimizing myself with it, right? Which is a piece of PTSD. It's a way of trying to take control. It's almost like if you think about S&M scenarios, which S&M scenarios for some people are really healing, right? But the reason is the consent element.
Hmm.
It's the choice element, right? So it's like, I'm choosing to consent to this. I know that I can stop it and I can have some control and power in a dynamic that may be reenacting something I experienced. So that is a way to regain control. Sometimes like doing prostitution or stripping can be the same thing. It's a way to
Right.
kind of have control, but it doesn't give you real control.
Right. It's
Right.
just the illusion
It's the illusion
of.
of it and it's a reenactment. So I was thinking about the what's called the trauma triangle. And so whenever you've been a victim of a trauma, of a traumatic event or events, you tend to operate from the trauma triangle. And so what that is on one end, you've got a victim mentality. On another, you've got a rescuer mentality, right? You want to rescue other people. And so that's where sometimes codependent behavior comes from. They're all messed up. I can help them. I love them, right? Right? The way we trick ourselves. Or, and this is the one we don't like to look at, the perpetrator side.
Mm.
And all of us have that if you've been a trauma survivor. And we project those same things onto other people. Like, I want you to rescue me, right? Or I see myself as a victim, therefore I justify acting out or perpetrating in some form. So it may not be a sexual version, right? It may just be, I can go and get really angry and curse you out because I think that you are victimizing me, right? That is still going in that part of the triangle. In PTSD work, the goal is to actually come out of all three. Does that make sense?
It,
You're like,
yeah.
whoa, mind
Well,
blowing, boom.
I had
I
never.
love that. You guys are so great. I just have to tell you, I just love you guys so much.
It's so fucked up, but it's like it's fun to learn about it. It's
Sure.
just fun to
Of
like
course.
you'll
Of
just sit
course.
here and have you speak to us and just become kind of educated on these topics because they are so relatable in a lot of sense. Oftentimes you don't think it's relatable, which is why all these experiences can be so isolating. So yeah, I don't know. I just love learning about it.
Well, and outside of that, your experience of, I don't know if you guys see this, but it's like your experience of an assault or a molest or whatever is somebody else can have a very similar experience, but the experience that you have of it is very different,
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
right? And that really has to do with the circumstances and the interplay between you and the other person or
Right.
people.
Especially like because Lauren and I were assaulted by the same person. I don't think that we've
Oh,
ever like
wow.
sat down and I know it's kind of interesting, like, but we've never sat down and like dissected, oh, this was your exact experience. But
Mm,
afterwards, like we had complete opposite not interactions. We had complete opposite
Reactions.
responses, reactions. Thank you. Lauren didn't want to tell anybody. I told everybody. Like there was
mhm.
complete opposite, and it was the same perpetrator. And
Yeah, so
I,
some of that is more your own personalities, your own, like, are you extroverted, introverted? How do you typically cope?
Yeah.
So some of that element may be more about your personalities.
Oh, definitely. Shannon is like
Hmm.
such an open book and will basically talk about anything. And then you have to really kind of push me to get me to talk
Hmm.
about stuff. And
Hmm.
so I feel like you just see how our personalities differ in that way, just like if you interact with us through our daily lives. Like
Right.
I am very closed off and like I kind of grew up thinking that if I talked about things or talked about my feelings, then like that made me weak or like things like that. And so,
Right.
that
Right.
still like
Right.
plays like I'm a lot better at it now and like I'm
Good for
so
you.
much better at being vulnerable, but it does play so much into like how we responded to our
Absolutely.
assaults. And it's kind of crazy to even sit here and, those were our lived experiences and we went through so much together, but like everything that happened, we had a vastly different response to it. And it was kind of crazy.
But, when you guys are bringing that up, did you find when you're talking about it that some of the ways that your perpetrator approached the assaults were similar? Did you ever compare that or
Yeah,
look at that?
I mean, I think that
I don't know
he
if it was or not.
well, he definitely manipulated us in very similar ways and like manipulated our family in the
Hmm.
same ways to
Hmm.
like
yeah.
gain
Hmm.
trust and gain that
Yeah.
trust very quickly.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
then like me and Shannon both opened up to him and like let him become part of our lives and like
Hmm.
trusted him. He knew that. He absolutely knew that. And so then he
And
just
it was
abused
intentional and
that.
purposeful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
That was a
definitely.
part of the grooming process for him.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And he knew exactly what he was doing.
Yeah.
And he was setting it up so that you couldn't tell your families and that your families would trust him and then he would have more access to you.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if I can ask you a question. I want to give you respect on your privacy, but it might be helpful for some of the people listening too. Did you experience when you first went over there and were with him that there was that element of like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I'm so like grateful, blah, blah, blah. And then did you see a switch in him that where the predator he became kind of cold and predatory?
Kind of. So for
Kind
me,
of.
like in my scenario, I didn't experience it like, oh, I need you. I know Lauren did. And I know the other women in the case did. For me, I actually needed him because I needed him to cover up for something that
Hmm.
I mean, it's a very complicated story, but basically I had some friends over the night before. My mom was out of town. They broke my front door. I needed him to cover and say that he had broken the door. And so I
Okay.
needed him. And the second he got to the house, it was all conversations around, wanting a woman, wanting to be with a woman, and like very much like turning the conversation away from just friendliness to, you know, in that direction. I don't know if that
Setting the
answers your
stage.
question.
Well, did you feel a shift from the buddy, the friend, to something that was more kind of cold and dissociated, kind of like kind of a very focused in like prey, kind of like predator feeling? Did you get that experience of that?
I would say
You
so.
may or may not. You may or may not.
But I don't think that I recognized it at the time.
Mhm.
But like all of the forceful things of, hey, like, are you gonna call somebody to pick you up? Like, I'm getting ready for bed, and why are you standing in the doorway next to me? And just little things like that. The lack of responding to my asks of him to basically not be near me and go away. And I felt like that was a sense of the predatoriness, but I didn't realize it at
Yeah,
the
he's
time.
pushing boundaries. Yeah, he was pushing your boundaries, right? If you ever read The Gift of Fear, that's one of the things that they talk about is one of your first warning signs is somebody pushing the boundaries. It's like they talked about a really brutal case, which is really hard to read about, but it was somebody who, was like, let me carry your groceries. I'll carry your groceries to your apartment. And she's like, no, 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 I've got it. No, 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 I'm going to help you. And that's how he pushed his way in.
Mm.
I swear that I've like blocked out most of my college experience just because of trauma and things like that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I remember the like first couple weeks of my freshman year of college. One of my guy friends from high school also went to the same school as me, but he had been there for a year, so he already had like a group of friends, and I was hanging out with them, and I had to leave because I had groceries delivered to my dorm. And one of the guys was like, "Oh, I'll help you carry your groceries in." And I was like, "No, like it's fine. Like I really don't need help. Like it's a
Hmm.
10-second walk from the counter to my dorm room. I don't need your help." But he was like, "No, no, no, no. Like let me help." And I immediately became uncomfortable, but I was like, "What the fuck am I
Hmm.
supposed to do right now?" He like came in, walked me to my dorm room, helped me carry my groceries, and immediately I was like, "Okay, like thank you so much." Like as in
Like, get it
you're
out.
get the fuck out of here. Like we're all good. You don't need to be here anymore.
I'm
You've served
good.
your
You can leave.
purpose. And he like would not leave. And finally he grabbed me and tried to kiss me. And
Hmm.
I remember I made myself like small and like dodged under his arm and was like, "I have a boyfriend. Like you need to get out of here right now." And I did not have a boyfriend, but I didn't know what else to say. And then finally when I brought another guy into it, he listened, which I thought was very interesting.
One of the things that you're describing is that female socialization is be nice and don't be rude,
Yeah.
right? And the translation of that is don't assert yourself and don't say no, which
Yeah.
is so hard. And if you've been a victim of sexual abuse or early sexual assault, even later, but earlier, you're going to have more of this, is you'll have a lot of freeze responses,
Oh.
right? And so
Hmm.
then it's like, I can't say no because I actually can't. Like
Right.
I don't have the ability to. And
Yeah.
it's not that you don't want to, it's just like, I can't do anything,
Right.
And so for you, you were able to find some sort of voice and he responded to it for whatever reason he responded to it. But a lot of people won't respond to that.
Yeah.
A lot of people know that you're bluffing,
Yeah.
Mm.
But it's
which is tough. But the thing that you did do that shifted is you got assertive
yeah.
instead of kind of going, well, no,
Right.
please, no, right? You got assertive and you shifted the dynamic in becoming
Mm.
assertive. But you have to kind of read the situation because sometimes being really assertive is going to actually spark anger and more volatility, right?
Right.
Right.
Here's the good news is you can listen to your nervous system. Your nervous system will make decisions for you. So it's like you're going to know instinctually how to respond that is going to protect you the best.
Hmm.
But it's challenging because you've got this other overlay. So if you can develop your ability to say no and be assertive, if you have that ability, then your body has more resources to come from, right? That's what's really helpful. So like one of the first things I do is teach people to say no.
How do
And
you
I'll kind of nudge
do
that.
that?
Well, I'll tell them, okay, let's practice. We're going to practice our no's.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll say like, okay, we're going to have this session today. And then afterwards, because I'm so good, you're going to give me $1 million. Okay, can you say no
Yeah.
to that?
Right.
Right? That's an easier one to say no to. But then I'll make it a little bit hard. Come on, really? No, no, no. So I'll push it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm still going to do something ridiculous like $1 million. It is obviously not going to happen,
Right.
Because I want to make it really clear that it's like, we both know this is not going to happen, and it's kind of funny, so
Mm-hmm.
we're playing with humor and keeping it safe, but kind of nudging and giving the experience of a little bit of pressure
Mm-hmm.
to help practice that assertiveness. And then I'll say to you, like, maybe, could you let your friends know that you're going to practice your no's? And so they're going to give you opportunities and you're going to say no, even if later you're going to go along with it because you want to. But I want your first thing to be a no, and make sure people know that that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right.
Being able to be assertive like that can be really, really helpful, especially for women in like literally every scenario and situation. I mean, obviously, in a lot of sexual assault cases, you do say no, you say no multiple times, you're very assertive, and
Yeah.
it still happens. And like,
Yeah.
that's one of the things that makes it like so horrific. Even when like one of my girlfriends, whenever we're like going out and we're at bars and like guys come up to us and we are clearly not interested in talking to them. We are in our own little circle, like very tight next to each other talking. We don't want any men talking to us. It's very obvious. She's so good at being like, no, leave us alone. We don't want to talk to you. And she just steps up and she's like, no, please go away. And it's kind of impressive because I think it can be so hard to do that because you don't want to feel rude, but they're the ones that are being rude by
Yes.
not listening to social cues and things like that, not leaving you the fuck alone.
hmm and it's true, right? Because then boys are taught got to be a little bit more assertive and kind of pursuing, because you may get the initial like, so there's this weird interplay that happens there that's
Mm-hmm.
tough. But then what happens to a lot of women or girls who are being assertive? You're called names. You're called a bitch. You're told like,
Right.
you fucking bitch. And then it's like intimidate. Like now you're getting intimidation,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? Now it's like, how do you say? It's hard. It's really challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of a catch-22 to be female sometimes.
It's true. Yeah. Like I
It's a
had this.
catch-22 a lot of times to be
Yeah.
female.
Most of the time. This was about a year ago. I was walking to a coffee shop, walking back to my apartment in an arguably like not a bad part of town, but it's still like in the city of Denver. And this guy's riding by on a bike and he says, "You're a whore." And I say, "Fuck you." And he says, "I wish I could fuck you, you slut." And then I just was like, damn, I said it back. I responded with like a negative thing and it just got worse. And luckily he, continued riding the bike, but I got worried. I looked back. I'm like, maybe I shouldn't have said something. Oh no, like there's nobody on the street right now. It's broad daylight, but there's no one around me. And then I had that fear response was like, okay, I better get back home quickly. But just an example of me being assertive and then it just kind of getting pushed right back in my face.
Exactly, exactly. And it's okay. What do you do with that?
Yeah, yeah.
Or my favorite, cat calls. Those are always fun. Like, really? You
I
think this is for me? This is never, ever for me.
no.
There's
Oh,
nothing flattering in a cat call. It's for
no.
each other. It's a
Yeah.
way of showing power and dominance.
I've never understood that. Someone drives by and cat calls me. Oh my gosh, let me chase after that car. I would love to meet that man in there. He must be the one for me. Like, fuck no. No one's ever thought that in their life.
And the reality is it has nothing to do with you because it's not for you. It's for them. It literally
Oh.
is just an act of power. It's a literal act of dominance.
In our initial conversation, you talked about how perpetrators can show signs between the ages of 8 and 12, or excuse me, 8 and 11. How can psychologists attempt to interfere during these ages and try to like break the cycle of abuse and recidivism?
Well, so the thing that is really important is getting to kids young. The thing that is so challenging is we never want to see kids as predatory. We will ignore signs of predatory behavior in children, usually. And it is a vicious cycle. because like DCFS will ignore it, parents will ignore it, teachers will ignore it. They'll dismiss it. They'll, just kind of correct the behavior in a moment, but not actually see it as something that is more a sign of something more serious.
Hmm.
And you definitely like, you have to make sure they're away from their perpetrator, and you've got to help them work through it with therapy and interventions. And some of those interventions could be more targeted with adolescents. I was working with adolescent sex offenders. We were doing therapies that were intervening in their masturbation fantasies, because sex offenders masturbate to the things that they're perpetrating fantasies repeatedly.
That's
And that
interesting.
serves to, you're right. And they'll watch porn that reenacts that same thing. And porn in and of itself can be neutral, right? Even if it's like more violent porn, it still can be neutral. It doesn't mean that because you watch it, you're going to act it out. But if you're a person who already has those fantasies and you find the porn that kind of shows it, now
Mm-hmm.
you're getting the visual, which is heightening the fantasy, right? And now you're
Mm-hmm.
going to be planning it. You're going to be thinking about it. You're going to find a way to reenact it, and then you're going to act it out. So there's the whole process in that. And so they're trying to interrupt it early. It's really questionable as to how effective it is. I think a lot of sex offender treatment programs were stopped because they weren't shown as being as effective. Sometimes more of the hormonal chemical castration has been proven to be more effective. But then you've got ethical issues of making somebody do that, right? So that's like, how does this actually work? But, the reality is that you really have to identify predatory behavior young and differentiate it between like sex play or like kind of reenacting that isn't predatory from predatory reenacting. And so it is really more, are there predatory elements there? Coercion, are you seeing something that's like they've got that look in their eye? There's things that they're using manipulation, coercion, things like that, this is a child who's really got that level of disturbance, and then helping them kind of understanding dynamics differently and intervening with those dynamics and making sure that, I mean, if they've got a parent who's reinforcing it,
Mm-hmm.
let's say they've got like a toxic masculine parent or whatever, or a female who's reinforcing that same thing of this is what a male is, or this is what, how you need to be as a tough female or whatever, it's going to work against it. But if you've got more of that kind of whole support around, then you can actually intervene if it's early enough. The problem is that the later it is and the worse the situation is, or how often they've reenacted, the more likely the pattern is to be set in.
Okay.
It becomes a part of your kind of what they call the quote unquote love map, but it's like a predatory version, and it's not really a sexual thing. It's this confused sexuality that isn't, it's not like your sexuality, like I'm gay or I'm straight or, I like intimacy or sex in these ways. That's your love map. It's a little bit more than that because you're really talking about this really compulsive thing. People want to lump predators into one group, but actually there's a whole lot of different reasons that they do act out. Some of it is developmental issues. Some of it is they've got brain damage. Some of it is that they're reenacting their abuse. Some of it is that they're really narcissistic and don't have empathy. Some of it may be antisocial. Some of it may be sadistic. So there's like a lot of different things that can be components of it. And so obviously some things are going to be more difficult to intervene with than others. But one of the complicating factors is that isn't it a great place to go to work with sex offender treatment? Kids who are being treated, like sex offenders can be drawn to that as well. And so you have these kind of complicated dynamics. So nothing is
Wow.
perfect.
I can imagine too, because we don't know exactly why they do it. There's so many different reasons why perpetrators, commit these crimes that it's hard to pinpoint a solution because there's a
One
myriad
thing
of
that
reasons.
Yeah, one thing that has been shown is that you really do need to have groups because they also need to be able to identify it in each other and be able to call each other out on it because
So like
they'll
a
pick up on it in each other more than other people will.
Cindie, what would you say if someone came up to you and said, it's only human nature for men to rape women?
start with a laugh.
Well, people do say that.
People say that, and I'm like, what are you on?
What a great excuse to justify that you're not accountable for your actions.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you that that is like not uncommon for sex offenders
Yeah.
to not have accountability for their actions. So that belief system very much supports that. One of the things that I don't think that we do a very good job of is teaching people about consent and what that really looks like. And I think that we need to be doing that on a regular basis at different ages. That should be a part of regular curriculums for children, like over and over, consent for lots of different things. But I think if we teach more of a culture of consent, then we delineate it a little bit better. That's definitely a part of rape culture and toxic masculinity, isn't it? But so if I decide that I'm going to hold you at gunpoint and rob you, does that mean I'm not responsible for my actions? Whose fault is it if I choose to go get a gun, come to you, hold it at your head, or
Yeah,
hold
it's
it at you
yours.
and done? Right. I'm the one who did all that. So
Hmm.
if I'm sitting here playing the fantasy out and now I'm going and I'm like sexually assaulting someone, I'm still ultimately the one who did it. So
Right.
I'm the one who's responsible. Not that I'm saying I've sexually assaulted. I'm not saying that.
Right. Right.
But I mean, ultimately, you're responsible for your own actions. One
Yeah.
of the things that is making me crazy about today's culture is that we are excusing bad behavior right and left. We are enabling the crap out of people and having bad behavior.
Yep.
It's like, well, they were victims, so therefore we shouldn't hold them accountable. Like, are you kidding me?
Right. Well, it's the
No, 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 no. That's exactly why you should. There
mhm,
has to be congruent, actions.
mhm.
There has to be a message that is really clear. One of the things that in the working with the sex offenders, they had to be referred by probation and charged with an offense because if they weren't, you can't hold them accountable because they're slippery. Sex offenders are the most manipulative group of perpetrators. If you look at, you go into the jails and prisons and where the sex offenders are, they have the most perks.
Really?
Inevitably, they have the most perks. They have the most, like special favors. They get away with so much because they are
Mm.
so good at manipulating.
Which is crazy because, like, in the
Yep.
movies and everything, well, and I think in the movies and real life, I hear people say, like, oh, even people in prison don't like the sex offenders. There's even a hierarchy there. And so, but
Sure.
they're so good at manipulating, like, the guards, you're saying, that they end up getting a bunch of free stuff, or is that what you're talking
They'll
about?
get more
Wow.
privileges, all kinds of stuff. Yeah. Because of their ability to manipulate.
Wow.
Right. Yeah. In prison, if you're like, oh, you did this kind of crime, they're going to get beaten up and attacked. That's true. But a lot of times the sex offenders are separated.
Right.
And in those groups, they often, because I can tell you, having worked with sex offenders, and like I ran a group home with teen sex offenders. And so all of the kids in there were sex offenders. And it was probably the most pleasant experience because they were helpful, they were cooperative. Typically they kind of were just the quote unquote normal person, right? They're not the kind of stereotypical like you see in movies that's,
Hmm.
oh, that guy is one, that no, you're not going to know that way.
Yeah.
Not at all. You're
But
not going
that,
to identify it that way. But when they switch into a predatory mode, there's a switch. There's
yeah.
a shift that
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
Mm.
Which is why I think it's so frustrating to be like, yeah, this guy assaulted me. And then the person you're talking to be like, oh, but he's such a nice guy.
Of course he is.
Yeah.
Of course he is. Of course he's such a fucking nice guy. Like, what?
It speaks to a compulsiveness, right?
Yeah.
A compulsiveness. Because, like, if, most of us are sexual, right? Or that doesn't decide whether we're a nice person or not a nice person, because
Mhm.
sexuality is a human thing, right?
Yeah.
So when you're not in that, that's not going to be where it shows.
Mhm.
It's going to show in that other realm when they kind of switch into the predatory side.
Right. And most of
Yeah.
us don't know like what our friends are like sexually. That's just not
Exactly.
something we have a lot of awareness of. And so how if you don't know that, then how the hell are you going to know like their sexual deviancies? I don't
Right.
know.
It makes it extra scary. The duality of it makes it even more scary to me.
We want to believe in things that are like good and evil. It makes us feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
But in reality, that's just not real. It's far more complicated than that. Usually people are just not good and evil, but there are, I mean, and with that said, there are people who are genuinely born evil. That is true. The research on people, it's typically a brain damage issue, but they don't have a fear response, and you'll see them kind of growing up, starting fires, torturing animals, things like that. They'll be a little bit more extreme situations, but you're going to see that in childhood. And that's a brain damage issue, usually, is what that's, unless you have like somebody really harming a child that way. But we like this idea of, oh, you know what? I'm going to just move you into the evil category. You're just evil, flat out. But that's not true. A lot of sex offenders also have done a lot of good things in their lives as well.
That is it for part 1 of our episode with Cindie Henrie. We covered a lot, but don't worry, we are just getting started. There's a lot more next week. In part 2 of this episode with Cindie, we talk about what it actually means to get stuck in the victim, perpetrator, rescuer triangle. I know we just kind of briefly touched on it today, but we dive a lot deeper into it next week. We also talk about how trauma lives inside of the body and what to do when your body remembers the trauma, but your brain cannot. And then we dive a little bit into the really dark dynamics of power, abuse, and silence in places like Hollywood. After all, Cindie has lived there for many, many years and worked with many people from there, so she's really gotten to see the dark underbelly of Hollywood. Until then, if you want to contact us directly, you can go to whattheydon'tsay.com. You can send us a message through our website. You can also check out our Consent is Hot merch line. We're working on adding more pieces for you guys, so be sure to check that out and stay tuned. We love you guys so much. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week. Cheers.